Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast, a space to pause, breathe, and come back to yourself, even in the middle of a full and busy life. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and in each episode, we explore mindfulness for real life, simple practices, reflections, tools to help you feel grounded, present, and connected to what matters most to you. So let's settle in and let's get centered. Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. In today's episode, I think we all just need a big exhale, like a collective release, an opportunity to regulate our nervous systems. There is just so much activity that is frying our systems. I've had so many conversations with clients or friends this week who are just expressing that it's hard to feel quote unquote normal. It's hard to just follow the schedule, pick up kids, do the jobs, like whatever it is on your docket because of what is happening in our news cycle. And on top of what's happening in the news, I know a lot of parents are feeling overwhelmed because the winter weather has kept a majority of the U.S. country indoors with extreme cold, lots of snow. So there's snow days, managing Zoom school again, having to also just manage your own mental health. So that's why I am so glad you are here, and just know that wherever you are listening to this episode, in this moment, I invite you to take a big deep breath with me and release with a big audible exhale. Let's do one more. Inhaling, breathing in, filling your body up. And a big release. You can even make some fun noise. And just feeling that slight shift of the body being invited to relax, the nervous system coming back to its parasympathetic state as much as it can. Not forcing, but just gently inviting. And that's what we're going to talk about today, specifically in the soul episode, are some practical ways that you yourself, you can model it, you can embody it, but how to be with the news cycle in a more supportive way. You're going to leave this episode with practical, actionable steps you can take that support you feeling more centered in the chaos that we are living in. So wherever, however you are listening to this episode, I welcome you to settle in and let's get centered. On the recent mindfulness winter retreat that I facilitated, I got this question a lot. This question when we were exploring how are we integrating this work, practicing silence, practicing mindfulness, meditating for many hours. And most of the people who are on retreat had a practice of maybe 5 to 10 minutes max a day. And here they were on retreat for 2 days, learning how to sit for 30, 40 minutes at a time. Learning how to bring mindfulness into their eating practices, into their speaking practices, into their self-talk, into how they move their bodies. And so we're really deep in this practice for 2 days, what you do on retreat, right? When we get away from the noise and the to-dos of your everyday life, and we got to zoom in on these mindfulness practices. And at the end of the retreat, we talk about, okay, now that I've had this space to learn and play and practice, how can I take some of this wisdom and insight I've gained and actually bring it back into my life, integrate it back. Because the idea of going on retreat is not just to have a wonderful experience and check a box, but it's to actually help us live our life more intentionally, now having this newfound experience and perspective. So a question that came up a lot was just how do I be in relationship to the news? How do I stay informed? How do I also manage my own nervous system? Like, it feels really overwhelming. So if you have ever noticed that watching the news or scrolling through your Instagram feeds spikes your anxiety, or maybe you notice you swing between being really obsessive with the news, what's happening, needing to stay informed, checking all the time, to the total opposite end of the spectrum where there's avoidance, where you're not wanting to open apps, where you're not wanting to check the news, while you're wanting to maybe hide underneath a rock. Wherever you are on the spectrum, know that you're not alone. And so many of us, myself included, are searching for ways that we can stay informed without sacrificing our mental health. When we activate our mindfulness muscles, when we pay attention to the present moment while we're doom scrolling, while we're reading the news, while we're listening to the news, when we engage our mindfulness muscles, when we pay attention with curiosity and kindness, we start to gain information. And with that information, we can make choices that are going to be the most supportive with the information that we have in that moment. And when I say most supportive, I mean also kind of the wisest choice. We're going to make the best choice for ourselves and our family in the moment when we gather more information. So I want to share with you practical tips of how we can engage our mindfulness muscles to stay informed, to stay present without burning ourselves out, and also to understand what's happening in our brains and our bodies when we're engaging the news and how we're impacting our nervous system with the choices that we make. Why does the news cause anxiety? Let's break this down. We know that violence, sensationalism, all of this type of hate, it breeds more of our attention. It spreads faster than kindness or happy news. There is research out there that we're more likely to want to watch something that has that aggressive behavior in it. So it makes perfect sense that these videos that show really horrible acts of violence spread like wildfire across social media platforms and news headlines. I was talking to a dear friend the other day and I was like, are we just soft? Is our age group and this time period just soft, or are we collectively navigating a lot heavier things than people of our parents or our grandparents' generation? When you look back and you think of people who went through World War I, World War II, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, all of these big life moments, how were they navigating through versus how we're navigating through? And I noticed I just kind of started to get into that comparison state, which wasn't really helpful because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The conditions are different. We are living in a culture right now where news and technology is spread so fast that we're hearing what's happening within the minute of it happening from a global perspective. And because of that power, we're also able to see all of these imageries right away. And it becomes so much for our systems to digest at a speed that it's really hard to decipher, is this real life? Is this a movie I'm watching? Is this even happening, right? It's kind of disorienting for our brains and our bodies to figure out. And as we know, our brain and our body's primary job is to keep us alive. It is to keep us safe. So the brain and our nervous system are always scanning our environment for clues of threat. Now, because we're getting all of this news so fast, right in the palm of our hands, it is really common that our nervous systems are then responding to the images that we're seeing because they don't know what's real, what's a threat in this moment versus what's a story that's happening. And it takes some time for us to be able to orient around it and to make sense around it. Now, add on top of that, we're getting a lot of really curated news and coverage. And so we're also getting these skewed views and experiences and tonation depending on who we're following or what communities we're part of. And so we're creating more divide and divisiveness between different perspectives. Now, if we're constantly getting exposed to these threats, that's activating our nervous system, and we're experiencing increase in cortisol, increase in the stress inflammatory markers in our systems, which not only affects how our body digests food, but it also affects maybe our sleep, which then affects our organs and our energy levels and our brain function, right? And it has all of these types of ripple effects that then can also impact our temper and our focus, which then can impact our relationships and our quality of work. And it just ripples into many areas of our life. So you might be listening to this and being like, yeah, Wade, duh, it's all really horrible. So what do we do? Well, I want to be clear that mindfully engaging the news doesn't mean that we avoid reality. It doesn't mean being emotionally numb. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine and just creating the positive thread. What mindful engagement of the news does mean is that we bring our presence, we bring our awareness to how the news is affecting you, the I, as the individual, paying attention to how it's affecting you and your body and mind. Because how it's affecting you might be different from how it's affecting me, which might be different from how it's affecting my cousin, which might be different from how it's affecting my coworker. And with that awareness that you're gaining, you then get to set some healthy boundaries with the news, and you get to choose how and when you want to engage the news versus being in this reactive relationship with it. So in other words, it's this balance we get to strike of staying informed while not letting the news hijack our nervous systems. So the first practice I want to offer us of how we can be interacting with the news more mindfully. One, I want you to switch the doom scrolling autopilot behavior and instead set intentional windows where you are checking the news in a focused and time-bound way. So what I mean by this is ask yourself, when am I most emotionally regulated? When do I have the most capacity in my body, in my brain, and my nervous system where I can actually stay as regulated as I can while engaging with the news? I can agree that checking the news first thing when you get out of bed or checking the news right before you go to sleep is probably not the smartest window. Even if you feel the most capacity in those moments, you might notice that they spike you out of your calm, collected, present state, and it derails you for the rest of the day. So again, I welcome you to think about, when do you feel the most regulated? Maybe it's the 10 a.m. hour while you're sitting down and having a cup of coffee. You've had some breakfast already. Maybe you've had your first meeting of the day. You're starting to check some email. Maybe it's after lunch, your 2 p.m. hour window where you're feeling a little sluggish and you're not really ready to get into the last kind of push of work for the day, and taking some time to just orient to what's happening on a global or even local scale feels doable to you. So find your unique windows and time box it. and time box it by paying attention to how much news actually helps you feel informed versus tips into the overwhelmed state. So, do you need to listen to an hour-long podcast to receive the news? Do you need to absorb reading the whole New York Times front to back? Or is there a place that feels a little bit more doable where you feel like you can be present to what's happening? Maybe it's listening to a 20-minute podcast summary of the latest news. Maybe it's skimming a few articles for 10 minutes. Maybe it's just looking at the headlines and giving yourself 5 minutes. Maybe you're somebody who wants to play around with checking national news one day and international news the next day, and then maybe alternating. I know that we live in a culture where it's typically like all or nothing. So we're a culture of extremes. And so it can be very easy to think, okay, if I'm going to open up the news to my brain, then I'm going to open up the floodgates. I'm going to open up everything. But maybe that's actually not the best thing for your system because it tips you into the overwhelm and that shuts you down. And again, that spirals you out. So start to get curious about what time of day and how much news works for you. And guess what? This doesn't need to be something super rigid. You can say, you know what, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes at my lunch hour to check the New York Times headlines. And then once you start to check the headlines, you can pause. Maybe you're at the 4-minute mark and check in like, do I have more capacity right now? And then maybe you give yourself 5 more minutes. So it doesn't have to be this super rigid experience if you don't want it to be. But I want to offer you having these boundaries to set into place so that you can use them to best support you. Now, another layer of discernment you can bring to your mindfulness practice here is thinking about what kind of news does your body ingest better. So for instance, I know that getting my news from Instagram can sometimes feel like the most effective way, the most time efficient way, but it's actually not helpful. It's really not helpful, and it activates my system and it just throws me off course. So I actually noticed that reading the hard paper when we get the Sunday Seattle Times would be my favorite way of getting oriented. Or sometimes it was listening to NPR while taking a walk or doing some gardening. I know many people who use Apple News as a way that they stay informed, and it's just like clickbait. And so then they're staying connected to these constant big attention-grabbing headlines. And so you have to ask yourself, is that a helpful way for you to digest the news? And if not, what would be a more helpful way to stay informed? Is it through a podcast? Is it through a newsletter? Is it by searching the web? Is it by going to your favorite source? To support us being able to discern how and when we want to be engaging the news, we get to activate our mindfulness muscles and pay attention to what our body is communicating to us. And so here's the second practice, is paying attention to how the body responds. So while we're reading, while we're listening, while we're watching the news, can we pause and notice what is happening in our body? Is our breath getting more shallow and shorter? Are we even breathing? Are we holding our breath? Is your jaw clenching? Is your stomach tightening? Is your heart aching? Maybe you notice your fists getting tighter and your body starting to speed up, wanting to get into action mode. So as we slow down to pay attention with curiosity and kindness, we're also engaging this interoception skill, this ability to listen, to notice the signs and sensations of stress, the stress response within our nervous system. So if your body is seeing a horrible thing in the news, a photo, an image that just really gut wrenches you, notice, how does that show up in your body? Is your body taking that as a threat? Are you wanting to fight, to flee? Is the body going into freeze or fawn? I remember coming back from a month-long silent meditation retreat, and my system was so sensitive. And I remember sitting on the couch and I was reading the Seattle Times, and I can't remember what was happening in the moment. It was 2022, I believe. And I just felt my heart ache so much. I started to cry. I started to just feel the pain of whatever I was reading and digesting. And it was a moment where I really had to pause and create some separation between me and the news that I was watching. And it was a moment where I had to take care of myself, like not rush into the next thing, not throw down the paper and then distract myself with a cookie or going back to my email, but to pause and just really care for the grief that was arising. So even taking a moment to pause when you notice sensations of stress in your system, like, oh my God, that's really scary. May that person be well. May they be healthy. Can we send out some good wishes to them? Or can we even say to ourselves, it's okay, sweetheart, to feel the grief. This is really heavy stuff. Or maybe you need to co-regulate with somebody, call a friend, go hug somebody in your house, a furry friend, go look out the window and take in some nature, find something beautiful to stare at, get the sun on your face, feel the fresh air in your lungs, look at a flower on your desk. All of these tiny actions are really helpful in regulating your nervous system and your stress response. So this brings me to practice number 3 is how can we care, right? How can we care, stay awake, stay alert to what's happening, but without burning out or over-identifying or creating a sense of panic where we lose our present ability. And it's so important that we're able to come back to presence, because presence is the only place that we can truly act from. And when we can act from as much presence as we can gather, we can also act as cleanly and clearly, meaning that we can act in alignment with our values, that we can act with more kindness and truth, that we can act with more intentionality instead of it coming from an autopilot place or a place of fear. Now, a lot of the people that I work with, that I had conversations this week around how do we mindfully engage the news, most of us, myself included, we are empathetic people. We can feel and absorb others' energies. And so it's so important that we pay attention to this practice where we recognize that we don't have to be solely responsible for global suffering, that we don't have to take the pain on and breathe it into ourselves as if it was our own. We don't have to be guilty for resting or for those events to be happening in a different state than our own. We don't have to create a false sense of urgency, one that creates this constant need to be reacting versus intentionally responding. As I'm saying this, I'm not saying don't do anything, don't stay aware, don't stay connected, don't take personal responsibility. That's not what I'm saying at all. We want that. But what we want to do is be mindful that we're not emotionally flooding our systems, that we can say statements to ourselves like when we feel something from the news, when we feel our nervous system get activated, we can say something like, this matters, this really matters, and I don't have to carry it all alone. And I don't have to be reactive and hit the share all button right now. And I don't have to prove that I am being political. And I don't have to, right? Like we can just slow it down so that we can start to take more intentional, grounded action instead of feeling this sense of reactivity that it is so easy to respond from. And having compassion for what's happening in the news locally and globally is so important, because that is what prevents us all from burning out and having compassion fatigue. So when we can practice more compassion, that, wow, that other person is suffering right now and I'm sending them love, it is a way that we can recognize that there's pain, that there is destruction, that there is hurt in this world, that there is some bad, horrible things happening, and the I doesn't have to identify with it. And so we can name it, we can see it, we can acknowledge it, and we can send care towards it without it pulling our energy away. And when we do this, it doesn't make us apathetic. Instead, it makes us a compassionate observer. It makes us a present, compassionate person who's witnessing that there is pain here and offering a lot of care for self, for others, without getting pulled into the storm of it. So the fourth mindful practice, after we've slowed it all down, right? After we've time boxed it, we're paying attention to how and when we want to consume it and how it's affecting our bodies and how to be with ourselves emotionally. The next part is action. It's how do we take wise action? So whatever mode of consumption we are taking is to maybe pause and ask yourself, is there a clear action step, a clear, meaningful action step I can take right now? One that aligns with my values. Is it maybe sending this article to a friend? Is it getting the name of senators that you can call? Is it researching places that you can donate your time or money to? Or maybe the wise action here is to regulate your nervous system. Like, whoa, I just got activated and I am in no shape to hop on this Zoom call in about 5 minutes. So let me take 2 minutes to recenter myself. When we practice mindfulness here, it supports us shifting from this autopilot panic place to one where we have awareness. And when we have awareness, we have agency. And so that sometimes is about taking action, and sometimes it's about saying, I'm at my capacity, I need to step away. And I want to remind you that both are valid. Like whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, both are valid and both are ethical. The question that I want you to really sit with is that, are you awake? Are you present? Are you making an intentional choice, or are you avoiding? Are you numbing out? Are you pretending you live in a bubble and none of this is happening? Because if it's the latter, I would really encourage you to wake up, to find ways, really small ways, maybe even making it smaller, the action steps that I shared today, of how to engage with the news in a way that stays and supports you staying alert, staying present without tipping into avoidance. Learning how to mindfully engage the news, learning how to mindfully engage just the noise that we live in is a radical act. We live in an attention economy that is fighting for our attention, urgency now, buy now, do this now, be scared. And so instead of going down that path, which is so strong, it is up to you to practice differently. Ways that you can say to yourself, I choose to stay informed and I choose to stay well, right? We don't have to make it an either or extreme. We can allow there to be a both and. So as you let all of this insight settle into your own mind, heart, and body, I welcome you to ask yourself, which practice, which mindfulness practice do I want to engage in this week to support me staying present and alert with the news? How do I want to stay informed and choose to stay well? Is there one boundary I can set when it comes to connecting with the news this week? Is there one form of media I want to try ingesting? Is there something I want to take out? I would love to hear what comes up for you. So reach out, share with me your practice on Instagram at OneWade, or you can send me a note linked in the show notes. And may you know that you are not alone on this journey. It is not about being perfect. It is a practice, and especially a world that is evolving so fast. We have constantly new forms of media of how to manage it. So we get to stay alert, we get to stay present to it. Take care of your heart, your mind, your body. Take care of somebody else's heart, mind, body. And until next time, stay centered.